Morning, we're learning as this chusra for Shalema Filan Chaya Basarach on Daf Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Amar Avu Namarav, 5 lines from the top. Amar Avu Namarav Mizbeach Shel Shiloh, Mizbeach in Shiloh. That means when the Yidden came out of the Midbar. So first they were waiting to conquer Eretz Yisrael, so they kept the Mishkan basically set up temporarily. And then they finally, after I think it was like 12 years, they set it up in Sheila. It was in Sheila for a long time. As we'll see in the Gemara, then it went to Noiv and Givon, and it went eventually to where Shlomo built it, when they built the Beis Hamikdash. So he says the Mizbeach in Sheila was made of Avadim. It wasn't the same as the Mizbeach Hadama in the Mizbeach in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, had earth inside of it. I guess they would fill it up with earth every place they went. It wasn't filled with stone. So he said, but this one in Shiloh was filled with stones. There are 3 psukim that use the word avonim to describe the future mizbeach. First of all, the pasuk says, "Avonim tasali lasivna and gazis." You shouldn't make it using a tool. If you use this tool, that will be mechalit. And another pasuk is Manisha Sham Mizbeach Hashem Alikecha Mizbach Avonim, and it says Avonim Shleimus Tivnes Mizbach Hashem. So 3 psukim saying that in the future you should make the mizbeach with stones. Echad Shel Shiloh. So we darshan Rav Elazar ben Yaakov darshan says Echad Shel Shiloh. The one is the one in Shiloh, which we just said was Avonim. Echad Shel Noiv V'Givon. The next one is Noiv V'Givon. No Beis Elamim. And finally the Beis Hamikdash that Shlomo HaMelech built. Masav Rachabarami asked, "Eish shegardim in the Shemayim b'mei Moshe, lo nistalken on mizbeach hanachoshes el b'mei Shlomo." He says the fire that went onto the mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu remained l'chayra in use on the mizbeach hanachoshes. So Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach that he filled with adama, it only left when Shlomo built the Beis Hamikdash. So how can you say it was converted from the Mizbeach Adama, from the earthen Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, when they went into Shiloh? If we're saying if this brisa is saying that the fire stayed on that Mizbeach and it was continuously in use until the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Sounds like the Mishkan, when it was in Eretz Yisrael, after the Midbar, had the same Mizbeach. The fire that was on the Beis Hamikdash didn't go out until Menashe was a big Rasha, put up a bunch of Avodah Zarah, and he took away the Mizbeach from the Beis Hamikdash. The Gemara is asking a question that we just said. If you're saying that b'mei Shiloh there was a new Mizbeach, a Mizbeach Avonim, how could you say it was the same Mizbeach from Moshe Rabbeinu until the Binyan Beis Hamikdash? Who the Amar Kreb Nasim? So the Gemara answers, he's saying Pshat, he's holding, even though it's true that it's a stira, he's just saying over, Rahuna's saying over the sheet of Nasim, the Tanya of Nasim Naima, Mizbeach Shel Shiloh Shenachoshes Hayah. He says the Mizbeach in Shiloh was the same Mizbeach of Nechoshes. Chalu Malei Avanim. But it was full of Avanim. He's saying, like we said before, like Rav said, that although we have a brisa that says that the fire stayed on until later, he says no. We have a different Tana that disagrees and says that it was opened up and full of avonim. It wasn't the Mizbeach Nechoshes, it was a different Mizbeach. Nachma Yitzchak has a different teretz. Ma'ilin Nistalko. What does it mean that the fire didn't go away from the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu? Lo Nistalko lebatla. The Mizbeach of Moshe was not batal, even though they built a new Mizbeach in the Mishkan in Shiloh. The Gemara is going to explain, Mahi, what does that mean? It sounds like there was two Mizbeachs that were standing in the Mishkan. There was the old Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu with the copper shel nechoshes filled with avonim, and there was also the new filled with adama, and then there was the new Mizbeach avonim. And sparks would go, the fire would light from the old Mizbeach into the new Mizbeach. Sounds very interesting. Sounds like he pulls over his car next to a dead car, and you need to get the sparks to come out. So that was it. They used the old fire, the original fire, to light the new fire. It just went by itself. That was one pshat. Rapama Amma ushpiza have a knocket. V'zimnin hacha, v'zimnin hacha. He says the fire would stay on each one of them. The fire came from the Shemayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom would send the fire, and sometimes he would send it on the old Mizbech and sometimes on the new Mizbech. It wasn't that the original fire necessarily fed or sparked the other fire. Tanan Hashem. K'sha'olu b'nei ha'goyla, ha'isifu olav daled amas min ha'adarim v'daled amas min ha'mayrav, k'min gama. Gemara says that when the Yidden, the Mishnah says, when the Yidden came back from Golus to build the second Beis HaMikdash, that's when the Mizbeach got its size of 32 by 32. Before that, it had been 28 by 28. They added on 4 amas. You have something square. If you want to add on to its size, you add on one, basically, kamin gamma means like an L shape. So they added an L shape, a 4 amma extension on 2 sides, thereby making what was 28 by 28 into 32 by 32. Instead of making 2 amas all around, they did 4 amas along 2 sides, which ends up being an extra 4 amas. My timer, why was it that they expanded the Mizbech by Bayesheni? Because the original Mizbech was not sufficient for the amount of people that were there by the Bayesheni. They needed more room. As we're going to see on Amud Aleph, you were allowed to make the Mizbech was actually allowed to be up to 60 amas. That was the upper limit, but it could be made any size. As long as it's the right shape, it can be made any size. So this was the Gemara saying that maybe Rabbi Yosef said it was insufficient, so they made it big. Amalei Baya Hashta Mikdash Rishon Dechsivbei Yehuda v'Yisrael Rovim K'Choyl Asher Al Svas Hayam. By the Bais Rishon, it said the Yidden were as numerous as sand by the sea on the beach, Sipik, and it was enough. The size of the Mizbech was sufficient to put all the karbanos that they would bring on the Mizbech. Mikdash Sheni, the second Beis HaMikdash, the Sivbei, the whole pasuk is Kol HaKol Ka'echad. The entire nation put together, Aber Rivuya was 40,000, Alpayim 2,000, Shalosh Meis V'Shishim. So it's 42,306 and 60. So that's much smaller than K'chayel Al Svasayam. So how can you say you had to expand the size of the Mizbech to accommodate the crowds if the whole Kahal, the whole nation that came back from Golus was only 42,000? It's much smaller. Amalei, Hasan Eishel Shamayim Misayata. Hacha Ein Eishel Shamayim Misayata. In the first Beis HaMikdash, the fire came down from Shemayim and burnt up what was on the Mizbech. I was having a whole argument with Luzi last night. He was having a hard time, going through the numbers of 100. We said 142,000 karbanos, 1,000 karbanos. How are you doing 142,000 karbanos in one day, no matter what size? It was saying like proportionally was enough. How is it even possible to burn that amount of things? So it was. That's what we said at the time was Eisham. That was a fire burning. It was like a furnace. Mikdash, even though there were more people, since it had the heavenly fire coming down and burning it, it was capable of finishing it off. But in the Bayesheni, there's no Eisha Shemayim to Misayaya. Kiyosa Rav and number of Shemim Padli Mishum Bar Kapara. So we just said, this was just started a couple of lines ago, that the second Beis HaMikdash had a larger Mizbeach. It was expanded by 4 amas over the original Mizbeach. He says, in addition to the expansion, Shisan Haisifu, they added on also holes in the Mizbeach when they would pour Nesachim. The Nesachim are the liquid karbanos, or liquid nesinis that they would make on the Mizbeach or by the Mizbeach. Originally, they would pour it down the side of the Mizbeach and it would go into the into holes in the ground. But now they made holes in the Mizbeach itself that it should the Nesachim should go through the Mizbeach in this additional part. The reason why originally they didn't have these tubes was because they said the Torah says it has to be a Mizbeach made up filled with Adama. It means it has to be full. It can't make any holes in it. In the end, they said, no, it's true. Mizbeach Adama does mean that it needs Adama, but we also says, the Torah says that the Mizbeach has to sort of drink up, it has to consume the Nesachim. So you can't pour it over the side, you have to pour it into the Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach has to absorb it. Now, if it's made out of Nechayshis, without any holes, without any place to go, it can't absorb it. Well, my Mizbeach Adama, but why we said Mizbeach Adama means that it has to be fully, has to be full of Adama. There can't be any openings in the Adama. He says, no, that just means Shemachub Adama. It just means it has to be attached to the ground. Like we said a couple of blot earlier, it means that the Mizbeach cannot be constructed on top of openings in the ground. It can't be over a cave. It can't be on top of arches. It has to be directly attached to the ground, but it doesn't mean it has to be full, that the Mizbeach itself has to be full, that it can't have any holes in it. Amr Rav Yosef. Lav Hainu Detanya. So it's interesting. Rashi says that Rabbi Yosef is going to say two different pshatim. Because Rabbi Yosef was blind, and because he was blind, he couldn't read what we had written, and he sometimes would say different things. He couldn't reconstruct in his head exactly where he had seen something or what he had said, what he had originally said. So Rabbi Yosef, Lav Hainu Detanya v'chinu. Is the pasuk v'yachinu hamizbeach al mechoinoisav. Mizbeach was placed on its foundations. Ki be'ema aleim me'amei aratzos v'ya'olav oilos Hashem oilos laboiku lo'erev. So it says al mechoinoisav she'igiu l'soif midaisav, that the Mizbeach, the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, he disagrees. He says by the second bias, it's not that they added on 4 amas, like we said before, because so we try to say it was because they needed extra room, but we said that it wasn't really necessary. There was more. So then we said no, maybe it was necessary because in the bias rishon the Aish burnt it up, the Aish Meshamayim burnt it up, and in the second bias they didn't have that Aish, so they needed a larger space to burn it up through natural means. He says there's a different reason why they expanded it. Because in the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, Rashi says, when it came to a time to build the Bayis Sheni, they were able to determine what David had said, which dictated how big they could build the Beis HaMikdash. That means Shlomo HaMelech was not sure about the maximum size of the Mizbeach, so he built it the minimum necessary that what he calculated was needed to build it in order to be able to use it, but he wasn't sure if that was really, if he was allowed to build any bigger. The Anshe Knesset Hagdolah were able to figure out from David HaMelech that they could actually build it bigger. V'ksiv, how could that be? Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem alei haskel. The Gemara asked, how could you say that Shlomo HaMelech did not know how big to build the Beis HaMikdash? But the pasuk says, Divrei Yamim, that everything was handed down. It was all written down. Hakol b'ksav miyad Hashem. Everything was plans from the Rebbeinu Shalom, where he explained all the different parts of the Beis HaMikdash, what he had to be done. Elam Rabbi Yosef kra ashkach v'darsh. Rabbi Yosef says no, that Shlomo HaMelech was able to. I'm sorry, not Shlomo HaMelech. The Anshe Knesset Hagdolah were able to darshan from a pasuk, and that told them what Shlomo HaMelech really, what the Rebbeinu Shalom had really wanted, what David was telling Shlomo to do. It says, "Vayomer David zehi beis Hashem alikim v'zeh mizbeach la'olah liYisrael." The pasuk says that David said, "This is the Beis Hashem, the Beis Hamikdash, and this is the Mizbeach Oila for the Yidden to use." Kibayis, so it tells you that the Mizbeach has the same maximum size as the Beis Hamikdash, the Bayis. Bayis Shishim Amma, Af Mizbeach Shishim Amma. Just like the Beis Hamikdash is 60 Amma, the maximum size of the Mizbeach is also 60 Amma. So that's the reason why let's hope it's not too claustrophobic for you here. There's no lights in there. I wanted to sit down, but it was couldn't see. So that's why the second Beis Hamikdash, the Mizbeach was bigger because the Anshe Knesset Gdola realized that it wasn't limited to the 28 amas that Shlomo had built it to, but rather it could go up to 60. Correct the Gemara. Bishlama bias minka or tzuras. The Gemara is asking.
How's it shaykh the Mizbeach is as long as the fibers?
That was the maximum. You could build it as big as the entire. Theoretically, you could build it. They never built it that size. It's saying, like we saw before, the Mizbeach could be bigger or smaller. That we had one time that they poured, someone was shayfach underneath where the Mizbeach was, and we said in the end, the Batza Batsuri, that if they minimized the size of the Mizbeach, they made it smaller, you could put underneath it. So the Mizbeach could get bigger or smaller as long as it was still square and as long as it stayed within less than 60 amas. So now when they built this second Beis Hamikdash, so I can understand how they knew where to build the bias. Minka or Tzurasai, its foundations, you could still see where the foundations were, and you look and they knew where to build it. Elam Mizbeach Mino Yadi. How do they know where to put the Mizbeach? Very strange question. I know we had many Gemaras talking about, was it in the Tzafon, was it on the Durham, was it in the middle? So why, it was a halacha. So why couldn't they look in the? They learned where it's supposed to be, right? It's either right by the edge, starting from the center to the left, or starting to the end to the right, or in the middle. I'm not really sure what kind of question this is. Amr B'Elazar, Ro Mizbeach Banui U'Michal Asar Agadol Aymanu Markolov. The Anshe Knesset Gdola got a vision that they saw the Mizbeach Ki'ilu it was built, and Michael bringing karbanos on it in its place in the Beis Hamikdash. Yitzchak Ro. Did I skip? Yeah. No. They saw the ashes of Yitzchak, not Yitzchak himself, but of the aisle that was brought in the place of Yitzchak by the Akedah. Shamunach Ba'is HaMakom was placed in the place where the Mizbeach was. Right, the mice of the Akedah happened on the Harabais in the Beis Hamikdash. So they're able to see that. The entire Beis Hamikdash, the reich was that of the Ketairis. They went around, they did the sniff test. They found they had the smell of the Evarim, the Emurim, that were brought on the Mizbeach. So that's how they were able to tell that it was the Makam of the Mizbeach.
Is the first bias or which?
The second bias. We're asking, how do they know where to put everything by the second bias? How do they know where to put the Mizbeach? That's what I was saying. I'm not sure why it was a problem. We've learned a bunch of Gemaras about where the Mizbeach was located. And now all of a sudden we're saying, how do they know? Yeah. The three Nevi'im that came at the time of the coming into the Beis Hamikdash, into the base, coming back from Golus to Bayesheni. Rashi says Chagi Zechariah Malachi. Echad Shahed Lehem Al Mizbeach. One told them where the Mizbeach should be placed. This is another pshat. Echad Shahed Lehem Al Makam Al Mizbeach. I'm sorry. One told them Shahed Lehem Al Mizbeach. What is that? So Rashi says Sheyesh Le Makam L'Hoisav At Shisha Amas. The din that we said before, that it could be up to 60 amas wide. And then the second one, Echad Shahed Lehem Al Makam Al Mizbeach. One told them where to place the Mizbeach. Echad Shahed Lehem Shemakriven Afal Pi She'ein Bias. And the third one told them the halacha that you could, if you put up a mizbeach, Rashi says that we say the din kitcha shaita kitcha lasid lavoi, so that the mizbeach still retains the makam of the Beis Hamikdash still retains its kedusha, and if you put up a mizbeach, you could be makrav on it. B'masnisa tana, you have a slightly different version. Rabbi Yaakov Aimer shlosh nevim ali imam in agayla. The three Nevi'im, Echad Shahed Lehem Al Mizbeach. One, like we said, was made both that the Mizbeach could be up to 60 amas. V'yal Makam HaMizbeach, and he also said where the Mizbeach was. That was one Nevuah. Echad Shahed Lehem Shemakriv V'Nafal Pi She'ein Bias. Another one said was the third in the first count. That was the second that they can make mizbech be makavan even without a base something. That's the last one said that you should write a sefer Torah with the ksav ashuris. Tonorabam. Karen v'kevesh v'yisoid v'rivua. The din that you have to have the kronos. That's these little horns on the corner of the mizbech. I just bought this book. I'm very pleased with it. The keves, well, that's this ramp coming up. The yisoid is this thing going all the way around on the bottom. The rivuya, the din that it has to be square, right? The length and the width has to be equal. Ma'akvin, that is all ma'akiv in the mizbech. You have to have all those attributes. Midas archay, midas rachvay, the length of the measure, the length and the width that they could both be 10 amas, so they could both be 40 amas. They have to be the same. Umidas kaimasa, and its height, ein ma'ak. Those are not ma'akiv. We know immediately. Where do we know this from? Amar Huna Amakra, Hamizbech, Koma, Hamizbech. The pasuk says Hamizbech, Koma, Mishanem, Hamizbech, La'akiv. Wherever the Torah says Hamizbech, it's La'akiv, and Rashi goes through. Shekomak Mishanem Hamizbech La'akiv. The Hamizbech Mashmak Shukain. Mashmak, that's the way it was, and it's La'akiv. Who the Mikri Mizbech? V'loy loy. If it's not a Mizbech. Or Bekaren Lagabi, the kronos, the horns on the top says Karnas Hamizbech. Or be Yisoid Ksiv Al Yisoid Hamizbech. Because the Pnei Hamizbech, the Pnei is the entrance to the Mizbech, which is the Karen. What Kavashu Panav Sham Mizbech Shailoy Dark Sham. Yeah. Okay. And also said Mizbech. And all these things it says Mizbech, so they're all Ma'akar. In fact, the Mara Alamayata Kior. So this Kior is not the same the Kior that the wash basin that they used. This is talking about this karkov. You see over here, there were two different decorative bands going around the Mizbech. This top thing was called a Kior. Kior l'Rebbe, the Saivev l'Rebbe Yossi. It's a machlokes about whether this thing over here was a band, a decorative band, or the catwalk that the Kehanim would walk on. But basically Yehuda. Hachanami de Ma'akav. Those should also be Ma'akav.
Catwalk?
Was right in this spot where the band was. Like in, the Kehanim would walk on it. Remember, if you remember, the Chatoyas, they had to be nice and down on these kronos.
Right.
If it was 10 amas high, how are they getting there? So they had like a walk over there that they would be able to. There was a second ramp to get to this second catwalk. It was like an indentation in the Mizbech. So it was the Amma Saiviv and the Amma Yisoid. So this Amma, where was it's not like we're showing over here, but the Mizbech was an Amma narrower on each side and narrower. Like let's say it's 5 by 5. That was 4 by 4 over there. And they could walk around that ledge.
I remember we're learning 2 days ago. I was referring to the kind of walking around over here.
That's the side.
That's the side. You think they were walking on this thing? There's a ledge on here for them to reach up. They're gonna go up the Kevesh.
The Kevesh had like a secondary exit in the middle to get to this walkway.
How tall was it? Was it 5 hours?
So we saw a bunch of shitas, so different mizbechas.
10, right?
One said 5, right? One said it was 5 amos, and one said it was 10. The pasuk said it was 3. That was the old mizbech of Moshe Rabbeinu. So a lot of different opinions.
Why did they walk up the ramp and just schmid on the kronos? Why did they have to go up the side?
Because it's only on one side. How do you get around to the other side? You have to do all 4 kronos.
Right, kronos at one side and then around this. Okay, fine. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it makes a big difference to have a picture.
Yes.
The Tanya. Oisa hayoim. On that day, Nifka Karen Mizbech, there was a whole fight going on between the Tzdukim and
right? Oh,
I'm sorry. I skipped. I'm sorry. They placed this underneath this karka, right? So this thing over here, the top band was the karka. And they put it underneath this something else there. It was a mechva. Tanya Ezu Karkov. What's the Karkov? I'm sorry. This top thing, this Karkov. Rebbe Yom is Zekir. Rebbe says the Karkov is the same That's this decorative band. Doesn't refer to this. It means that ledge that was on top of the mikvah. Zakmara. Yeah. So why don't we have this also Makov? So in Nechanami Utaka was Makov. The Tanya Oisayim Nifka Makaran Mizbech. On that day they were paigim the horn of the Mizbech. They view bull shel melech. They brought some salt to close up the pagam. The satmua, and they closed it up. Lem meisha kashal avoida. It does not because that when the karen is missing, it's kashal avoida. It's not going to help to put salt and cure the problem. Elishayir mizbeach pagam, because they didn't want that it just for appearance's sake. They stuffed up the hole in the karen. But if there's any pagam in the mizbeach, you can't do the avoida. And the Brisa continues, Shechol Mizbech she'ein lo karen. Any Mizbech doesn't have the kronos, the kevesh, and the ramp, the Yesod, the Yivuya, and squared off, puzzle. The Beis Yehuda Omer Afas Seviv. The Beis Yehuda says, in addition to those things, you also have to have the Seviv. If the Seviv is not there, it's puzzle. So we're saying it's the same with, that was Rabbi Yehuda, because he says, it says Mizbech, it says, Misata Oiset Tachas Karkov HaMizbech, Mata. You have to place whatever it was. So we say, one man says it's a saiv, the other one says it's the kiyar, but whichever one it was, it says mizbech about that, and therefore it's mak. Turn around. Ezu karkav. What is the karkav? Ben karen lekaren. The karkav was between the horns on the top of the mizbech. Makam hilach raglei kahanim. Amma. There was an amma for the Kehanim to walk between one Karen and the next. So now we're going to say soon, there's two karkovs. There's the karkov that we just talked about on the side, and then there's a karkov on top. We'll see. So, but first the Gemara asks, did the Kehanim really walk in between one Karen and the other? It's not a walkway. You have a Karen at the corner. It's going to stop you. You can't walk all the way around. Right? The top of the Mizbeach was these four kronos. And they were amma wide, so you're saying that the walkway was from one Karen to the next. When you get to the corner, you're going to have to go around the Karen.
At this point, we're thinking the walkway is on top.
Well, there's two walkways. There's a walkway on top in addition to the side. We haven't gotten to that. There was an additional inside of those that there was one amma all around the outside. That was included the amma of the Karen, and within that there was another walkway that was one amma wide. The pasuk says, they made the michbar. They had this reshes that was underneath the michbar. That was underneath the karkov. I'm sorry, until the halfway point. So
like a net?
It was like a mesh. It was a decorative, I don't know, copper, net that was on top of the mizbech. The Gemara is saying, how can you say it was on top if we're now describing it as being on the side of the mizbech? That was underneath the karkov till the halfway point of the mizbech. There were two karkovs. Chad lenoi, one was for decoration. This one on the side of his mizbech, and one was on the top that the Kehanim I think shouldn't slip. It was like a grid. It was placed on the place where the Kehanim walked, so they shouldn't slip. That's what it sounds like to me. They had a decorative covering on the top of the mizbech as well. Midas archaya, midas rachaya, midas kamasa emak. We just said that the length and the width and the height are not ma'akav. As long as they're squared, it's good. It can't be, there's a minimum, it can't be less than Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach. But kama, what's that size? Rav Yosef, Amma. Rav Yosef said the size of the mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu was one Amma. Mechko, they laughed at him. Chamish amas arev, chamish amas reichav. The pasuk says that it was 5 by 5. Abaya said Dilma Makam Aracha Kamar. Maybe when he said one amma, he didn't mean the entire width of the Mizbeach. There's probably a better picture to show this, but Moshe Rabbeinu's Mizbeach was taka 5 amos by 5 amos, but like we said, the top of the Mizbeach, the outside amma, included the Karen, and then you had another amma that was the walkway of the Kehanim, and then there was only one amma left in the middle, right? If you take 25 by 25, you take the outer 5 by 5, that equals 20, and then, not 20, 18, right?
5 by 5.
5 by 5, but the sides are only 5 also, right? So no, it's 16, right? It's 16 square amos. You have a good picture of it.
4 by 4.
Well, each it's 5, right? And 5. So if you add up all those together, it's 5 here, and then 3 in between on each side. So it's a total of 16.
In graph paper, Tom.
3 in between. Why 3?
Because there's only 5 on each side. Right, so you can't double count the corners. How many square amos is that? Outside thing, it's 16, right?
So it's 3. So it's like this. So it's
And then
1, 2, 3. So you have to 1 amma by 1 amma, because 2 by 2 around you can't use. 1 between the corners, 1 to walk, and then you start with only 1 in the middle.
Right, exactly. So when he said 1 amma, he was talking about the 1 amma left in the middle for the maracha. The way I say it is 16 outside, then the middle one is another 8, right? 3 by 3 minus the middle is 8. That's left you 25 minus 16 minus 8 equals 24. This is the way my mind works. Yeah. Amalei Mar the Gavra Rabahu. So Rabbi Yosef said to Abai, "You're a great man. You're the Makamina. You understood what I was saying. Kari Alayu Bnei Keturah. But the other ones, I'm calling them Bnei Keturah. Rashi Bnei Keturah Bnei Avram Atem. I would like because they're Yitzchak v'Yaakov. Seems a little excessive. He said they didn't understand. Then he says you're not part. Wait till you see the next thing. Bnei Achsei. This is a strange story. Bnei Achsei the Rav Tarfon have a Yasvi Kamei. Rav Tarfon's nephews were learning by him. Kamei the Rav Tarfon. Pasach v'Yamar. Yosef Avram v'Yikach Isha Shmo Yochni. Avram, he quoted the pasuk. The pasuk says Avram went and took a wife, and her name was Yochni. Now, you might not be familiar with this pasuk because it doesn't exist. So Rashi says, pasuk v'yamar k'dei sheyidabru. He wanted to get the nephews talking. Yochni milsa ba'almahu the kamer k'dei lifsayich pm. He said this in order just to get them talking. It was shmoi keturah. That's what the pasuk says. It doesn't say there's no Yochni. Amri lei keturah. They said to him, it's not Shema Yochni, it says Shema Keturah. They told him, what about the pasuk? Kari Aleim B'nei Keturah. So he started calling them B'nei Keturah. He said, you fell into my trap. I tried to get you to say something, and you weren't smart enough to realize that I was goading you. I was shepherding you, and you fell right. It's a strange story, right? He said something on purpose to get them to talk, and then they said what he expected them, and he stops calling them B'nei Keturah. Okay, we're going to have to stop here.
Cultural gap over here.